Amsterdam in the 1600s, the Golden Age. In the 1600s, Amsterdam entered what we now call its Golden Age. But at that time, the city was not trying to become famous. It was not trying to impress the world. It was focused on something else: organization, trade, and discipline. Amsterdam was built on three important foundations: water, commerce, and careful management. In the early 17th century, Europe was changing. Long-distance trade was expanding across oceans. Ships were traveling to Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Money was increasing. Information began to travel faster than armies. News about markets, prices, and voyages could change fortunes overnight. Amsterdam stood at the center of this transformation, not because it conquered lands, not because it built an empire through war, but because it coordinated trade better than anyone else. The city did not loudly show its power. Instead, it carefully recorded it. Using maps, legal records, building remains, and written accounts from that time, historians can reconstruct Amsterdam during its Golden Age. When we look closely, we do not see a myth or legend. We see a system that works. Let us begin at the heart of the city: Dam Square and the Town Hall. Dam Square was the administrative and symbolic center of Amsterdam. It was not extremely large or dramatic. There were no giant statues or royal ceremonies, but it was always busy. People crossed the square all day: merchants delivering contracts, messengers carrying sealed letters, workers pushing handcarts filled with goods, officials entering and leaving the town hall. The main building dominating the square was the town hall, today known as the Royal Palace. It was not built as a royal palace. It was built as a city hall, a place of government. Its design reflected balance and order: thick stone walls, symmetrical design, clear lines, very little decoration. Inside, clerks carefully recorded everything: taxes, trade agreements, disputes, contracts. Nothing was left to memory alone. Everything was written down. City officials met there to regulate trade, maintain canals, manage infrastructure, and protect public order. In Amsterdam, power was not dramatic or theatrical. It was bureaucratic. Power was exercised through procedure. Outside in the square, business continued as usual. There were no military parades, no royal celebrations, just daily work. The city governed itself while it worked. The Canal Ring, or Grachtengorde. If you look at Amsterdam from above, you see its most famous feature: the Ring of Canals. This canal system, known as the Grachtengorde, was carefully planned. It was not random. It was an engineering project. The canals had several purposes: control water levels, prevent flooding, provide transportation routes, and define property boundaries. Along the canals stood narrow houses built on small plots of land. Because the land was limited, houses were tall instead of wide. They had large windows to let in light, hooks on the roof to lift goods from boats below, and strong foundations built on wooden poles. The canals were quiet but active. Boats carried barrels of goods, timber, food supplies, textiles. Smaller boats transported people between neighborhoods. The canals were not built to look beautiful. They were built to function. Amsterdam did not try to dominate nature. It negotiated with it. Water was not an enemy. It was a partner. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange. Near the center of the city stood another innovation: the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, established in the early 1600s. Here, something new happened.
Traders did not exchange physical goods, they exchanged risk. People could buy shares in trading voyages. These voyages might take years to return. Ships might arrive full of spices and profit, or they might sink. Profit was uncertain, loss was possible. Inside the exchange, men spoke in calm, measured voices. Contracts were written by hand. News traveled through letters and rumors. Ship arrivals were closely watched. The exchange allowed risk to be shared. Instead of one merchant risking everything, many investors shared the uncertainty. This changed capitalism forever. Investment no longer required physical presence on a ship. A person could invest from a distance. Amsterdam began trading not just goods, but the future. The Port of Amsterdam. At the edge of the city, theory returned to physical labor. The port operated constantly. Ships arrived from Asia, Africa, the Atlantic world. The harbor was crowded with vessels. Workers unloaded spices, sugar, timber, textiles, raw materials. Everything was counted, weighed, and recorded. The harbor was loud but disciplined. Orders were short, movements were practiced, time was important. This harbor connected Amsterdam to a global network of production and consumption. Goods arrived, were sorted, and then sent across Europe. The wealth of Amsterdam was not stored in one place. It flowed through the city like water. The VOC headquarters. One of the most powerful institutions in Amsterdam was the Dutch East India Company, known as the VOC. Founded in 1602, it became one of the first multinational corporations in history. From its headquarters in Amsterdam, trade routes were planned, ships were financed, colonies were managed, contracts were signed. The VOC controlled trade with parts of Asia, especially spices from Indonesia. It combined private investment with state power. The company had its own ships, soldiers, and global network, yet it was managed through paperwork, contracts, and accounting. Again, Amsterdam's strength was not dramatic, it was systematic. A city as a system. Amsterdam during the Golden Age was not simply rich, it was organized. Government was administrative, water was engineered, trade was coordinated, risk was shared, information was recorded. The city did not depend on spectacle, it depended on discipline. Amsterdam became powerful not because it conquered loudly, but because it managed quietly. And in doing so, it helped shape the modern world. VOC headquarters, corporate power begins. Behind plain brick walls stood the headquarters of the Dutch East India Company, often called the VOC. From the outside, the building looked simple. It was not decorated like a palace. It did not display its power openly. But inside, important decisions were being made. The rooms were large but not luxurious. Wooden tables were covered with thick ledger books, letters from overseas colonies, detailed maps of sea routes, shipping schedules. Directors gathered to decide which ships would sail and when, what goods they would carry, how much protection they would need, where investments would be placed. Clerks calculated costs carefully. They estimated profits. They recorded every number with precision. The decisions made in these quiet rooms affected the world. Markets shifted. Colonial policies were formed. Conflicts began thousands of kilometers away. This was one of the earliest forms of corporate power, private, organized, and global. Profit and violence existed side by side, but both were written down in accounting books. Numbers made power appear orderly and rational. The Jordaan, the working district. West of the canals lay the Jordaan district. Here lived the workers who kept Amsterdam functioning. The streets were narrow. The houses were older and less uniform. Life happened outside in public view. Laundry hung between windows. Women worked together, talking as they shared daily tasks. Children played in the streets. Craftsmen used tools passed down through generations. These people supported the city's prosperity. They unloaded ships. They built houses. They repaired tools. They prepared goods for sale. Yet they did not share equally in the wealth created by global trade. Their lives were shaped by routine, physical labor, immediate needs. They did not invest in distant voyages. They lived day by day. The Jordaan was the human foundation of Amsterdam. Without these workers, the entire system would collapse. Montalbaanstoren, watching the harbor. Near the eastern harbor stood the Montalbaanstoren. Originally, it was built as a defensive tower. It monitored ships entering the city. Its purpose was not aggressive warfare. It was surveillance. Officials observed maritime traffic. They identified incoming vessels. They ensured security. Identification mattered more than force. As Amsterdam grew and expanded, the tower's military role became less important, but it remained part of the city's structure. It stood as a reminder: trade requires vigilance, wealth requires protection. Westerkerk, religion and discipline. The Westerkerk rose above the western skyline. Its interior was simple: white walls, open space, minimal decoration. This reflected the Calvinist religious culture of the city's majority population. Faith in Amsterdam emphasized discipline, personal responsibility, and moral order. Religion did not loudly dominate daily life. It quietly structured it. Work was seen as service. Wealth was seen as stewardship, not display. Success required self-control. The church reinforced values already visible in commerce and governance. Order was both economic and spiritual. Tavern culture, the evening city. As evening approached, the rhythm of the city changed. Work slowed. The streets became quieter. Taverns began to fill. These taverns were important social spaces. They were not fully private, but not completely public either. Inside, light was low. Wooden tables were worn smooth. Mugs were lifted and set down. Pipes glowed in the dim air. Men discussed shipping delays, market prices, political news. Information spread slowly. It moved from mouth to mouth. News was repeated, corrected, and adjusted. Alcohol made conversation easier, but social rules still controlled behavior. Arguments sometimes appeared, but rarely became violent. Voices rose, then softened. Taverns extended civic life beyond daylight hours. They completed the daily cycle of the city. A controlled system, not a romantic myth. Amsterdam in the 17th century was not chaotic. It was not romantic in the modern sense. It was measured. It was controlled. It was disciplined. Its strength came from systems rather than symbols, records rather than monuments, coordination rather than conquest. From these foundations emerged something new, the modern global city. Amsterdam did not dominate through spectacle. It governed through organization. If you would like to see another historical city reconstructed in this way, leave a comment below. Which city should we explore next? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into history, please subscribe to the channel and join us for the next exploration.